This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's episode of the DocNJock Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Adam the Jock Straczynski. On today's show, this female wrestler is off the market, and Doc is so sad. How much money is MJF making? We got the lowdown on that, as well as who did WWE contact from AEW, and who else is asking from their release from AEW? We got the lowdown on all of that coming up. Of course, we're going to take a look at all the fallout from Grand Slam with AEW, and WWE was up at the plate this week, and did they have a couple of misses? Me and the Doc are going to break it all down like we always do, and doing it with me as always, he is the one, he is the only, he is the Doc, John Macaroon. What's up, cuz?
Adam, I'm very curious because you seem to have great takes on wrestling. You seem to be very knowledgeable about the reviews. But I'm curious, when you watch SmackDown, how do you get such inside knowledge when you're burying your head into a dog trying to fall asleep? I'm very curious. How do you watch main events nearly passed out? Is it like through audio? Is it through like Metamorphosis that you just kind of get the knowledge, or some late game review? I'm really fascinated. How does that work?
Look, man, this has been a very long week for me. I worked doubles the last 3 days, and I knew Friday was going to be a struggle for me, and Friday at work was very, very busy. So when I got home, I was basically beat, and I was ready for bed at about 8:00. And I made it to the main event of SmackDown. At some point, I had passed out for about 10 minutes. And so the video you seen was me sleeping for about 10 minutes. And then I woke up and I had to rewatch everything. And then I had to watch, I basically knew what took place on Rampage. So I just had to watch it just in case there was something else that kind of I missed. But I knew the fallout, I knew the scores from Rampage. So didn't have to pay as close of attention to Rampage, but yes, it all caught up to me on Friday night. So,
well, I can't.
I was hoping you weren't going to call me out on it.
I thought it was funny looking. I'm like, oh, it was one of the best parts too. But I can't myself take any extra credit either, as much as I would love to. I got a new recliner downstairs, and now the routine is, get through everything: the long days, football, wrestling, hang out with the family. Now the kids are in soccer, so I hit the couch. And you recline it just a little bit, and now I'll just be watching, and then I'll just wake up like at 4 a.m. And it happened on Raw. I clocked out at 9:45. It happened on Grand Slam. I made it all the way to 9:53 as Jon Moxley gets. It was the spot where Moxley has Danielson at the top rope, and then I'm out. So I made it to 9:53 and didn't even know who won the match. So when I woke up, I'm like, darn. And that's just the way it's been, where I'm not even like actively falling asleep. I'm just there 1 minute and out the next. And it's just the way it is. But there's so much good that happened this week in wrestling that there's so much to talk about, with surprises, debuts, angles, the way in which we want to see mid-carders kind of elevate. So it was a really good week of wrestling, whether you and I stayed up for it or not.
Yeah, it was. Sometimes it just seems like there is so much wrestling we've got to watch, and there's talk that AEW might be getting a third hour, and whether that third hour will be for Ring of Honor or whether that third hour is going to be more AEW programming. There's even more talk of even more wrestling coming down the way. Don't really have the details. That's why we haven't really brought it up, but I will just give you that little bit of nugget here. But WWE, let's start the week off with where we started our week off. Started our week off with WWE. And after a few weeks of a lot of highs, I think WWE has been crushing the game. I kind of felt like this week's Raw was, I felt like it was a little formulaic. I felt like it totally missed the mark. And where it gets a little bit formulaic is we had a bunch of big matches, and all of the matches ended with outside interference. And usually when you do that, you're trying to protect the talent that is inside the ring. I just don't think you needed to do it on every match this week. And it was a bit of a struggle because they did it on every single match. I don't know. I thought it was a little bit frustrating. I felt like Raw kind of let you down because they've been crushing it. And this week was one of those weeks where if you missed it, you didn't miss anything, I don't feel.
Well, I disagree a little bit in that I thought the first hour was really solid. You started it off with Bobby Lashley and Seth Rollins, and I thought it was a great match that was won by Bobby Lashley. And then Kevin Owens, Austin Theory was a good match. Yeah, I think that they did go with the interference angles a lot to kind of push things forward, but I will say this, the matches that were lined up were pretty good.
They were all really good matches.
Yeah.
The way they finished it felt kind of clunky.
It did. And I understand you and I are more traditional where we want to see winners and things like that. But sometimes it's tough when you look at it, especially with Kevin Owens in Theory. Do you really want to have a match end clean? Look, Kevin Owens, man, he is just dominating. And to see that match with Austin Theory, outside of the results, I would say that I'm grading the results a little bit more where I favor what's going on in the 10, 12 minutes in the match, and then the what occurs as the finish, I'm grading with a little bit less weight because, man, I wanted to see it. I wanted to see Kevin Owens Theory. I wanted to see Seth Rollins. Man, they could turn that dude face anytime they want. The guy's over and he's playing a heel. That's how elevated Seth Rollins is. I wanted to see that, and I think it was such a great way to have Bobby Lashley defeat Seth Rollins and to retain. So absolutely. I think where it got disappointing was once the Judgment Day angle hit, and then once you kind of have progressed through the show and you have the Alexa Bliss Bayley situation, that's where you can say, well, hey, you could have progressed it in a lot different manner. What was the one finish that you thought could have been different? What would you have done?
I didn't think that you needed Alexa Bliss to be beat by Bayley with outside interference. Like that didn't make any sense to me. They end up cutting a promo early in the show where Bayley basically challenges her and says, "You lost your edge. You're not the same wrestler you used to be." So to play into that, lean into it a little bit. Have Bayley beat her clean. You don't have to have that outside interference. I know Bayley is a heel, but you don't have to have that. You don't have to do that. You can show that Alexa Bliss has maybe lost a step, especially with everything coming out where WWE is putting QR codes in the background, and you scan the QR code and you go and you watch a video, and it seems like Bray Wyatt's showing up at some point. Honestly, I was anticipating it on Friday night. We didn't get it. Got another QR code that sets up something for Monday Night Raw. So it's weird that you have all these things going on. If you have these going on, just kind of lean into that a little bit. Let everybody think that, hey, Bray's coming back and she's going to go back to Bray. I don't necessarily want to see her go back to Bray. I'd like to see her go back to her old character. I thought she was so damn impressive. I try telling people who don't watch a lot of wrestling or haven't watched a lot of wrestling how good she actually is, and they don't necessarily get it. They're like, yeah, she looks good in the ring, but they don't get how good she actually was when she was champion and when she was competing for championships. Instead, they've got her in this weird little, I don't know, mid-card tag team. So that was the one that really stood out for me. What about you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. I thought that's where I would have done something different. I might even had Alexa Bliss do something to kind of cheat to win, to kind of take the shine a little bit off of Bayley. And one of those situations where as soon as Alexa Bliss wins clean, then the trio comes out and just kicks her ass. Because, see, I think the thing that happens is you use the right word. You said formulaic, which is the heels cheat and the heels use tactics. And we've seen it so much with the Bloodline that we're just kind of way over it at this point. Like, heels can find new creative ways to cheat to win. And it doesn't have to involve outside interference. It can be just picking a body part and working it over. It can be moves in the ring. It can be cheating where the officials got their back turned just for a second looking somewhere else and they use something. Just a lot of different ways that heels can get the heat by cheating. But it is formulaic in that they've established that heels do things through disadvantages, but there's so many factions that they've just gone to the tried and true, hey, outside interference, because there's everybody's got a stable, But I also, to give credit, I am loving what they're doing with Sheamus. I'm loving what they're doing with a lot of the mid cards, especially now with Dexter Lumis and, him coming through the ring and scaring the shit out of the Miz and kind of push that along a little bit. I love seeing AJ Styles, just having that little brief interaction, kind of teasing something going on there where he goes and says to Finn Balor, "Hey, I didn't turn my back on you. You joined the Judgment Day. You think I'm going to turn my back?" And Finn Balor says, "I've never done anything to make it so that we're on the outs." So a lot of inside nuggets that keep you intrigued. So while, it wasn't a fully complete show, I gave it a B-. That was my grade, and my note was, more creativity for the heels in their cheating tactics.
Yeah, I felt let down by Raw this week. I didn't feel like Raw hit all the marks. And then you move into Tuesday night, and you find out that Solo Sikoa has to relinquish the North American Championship. What was your reaction when you heard that? Because I was a little bit annoyed. And then when you fast forward to Friday night and you see him with the Bloodline, to me it makes it even worse. I think one of the best things about Solo Sikoa was that he had a championship. If you looked at everybody up there but Sammy Zayn, they all had championships. And I thought that belt looked great on him. On top of it, he defended that belt on Monday Night Raw. Or no, he defended it, I believe, on last week's SmackDown. And it to me, it just kind of added a little bit more of a gravitas towards his character, his role. He felt more important when he had that championship in the Bloodline. And it made for an interesting dynamic with a guy like Sami Zayn, who was the only one who didn't have a championship. He was kind of the odd man out. And it was weird because Solo really liked Sammy, and Sammy really liked Solo. And there was a lot of stuff that you could play off of and really build with that story. And now you just pull it off him. And the reasoning is he was unsanctioned for a match. Like it just, to me, it didn't make sense. And here's the thing. Wrestling is we all know it's made up. Wrestling is a lot of fun. But when you tell stories, it sometimes has to make sense, right? Like you can follow a Bray Wyatt story and nothing can make sense, but at the end you know that you're going to get the payoff and it's going to make sense. You can't just do things just to do them sometimes because it just doesn't work. And this is one of those situations where, to me, it just didn't work. Like, you pulling the belt off of him because he's not sanctioned just doesn't make sense to me. What was your reaction when you heard that he had to give up his belt?
Yeah, I was disappointed as well because it did. It just felt like the wrong decision. Why? Let him defend it on two shows. Let him show up. I mean, this is a young cat that's developing his name, his brand. So absolutely, I think it was an opportunity that you saw.
I'll be honest with you. I like that part of it too. Him defending it on NXT and him defending it on either Raw or SmackDown. I thought that was a great little twist. Yeah, or if you're gonna take it off of him, then you got to get the next guy in line. I think the tried and true tradition is you and I are not going to agree with people, and so often now these title holders are just getting their belts stripped, from CM Punk a couple times now to Solo Sikoa to the tag belts. It just seems like the lineage of passing down a title has been kind of overlooked on occasions, and you and I are not a fan of that. I don't like it. I think that if you were going to do it, the less disturbing way would have just been have him lay down to somebody that you think is next in NXT. The tried and true way of saying, hey, this is Solo Sikoa, that, hey, he's got this opportunity against this person, and it would have been a surprise, and then he loses. The tried and true way that was kind of the code that, oh, this character potentially is going to be called up. Like when Braun Breaker probably loses next the NXT title, you would assume that the following weeks or so he's going to join. He's going to join the main roster. So I think the tried and true way is to pass it down. The stripping of titles is going to be something that is going to be disappointing. Yeah, it's more of an optics thing, right? Like, he ends up winning, and now he just has to fork over the championship. On top of that, it just doesn't look as him without a belt in the Bloodline. After you've seen him with a belt with the Bloodline, it just looks different. And not saying that it looks bad, it just looks different. And to me, it doesn't look as impactful. It was so impactful seeing him up there with that championship belt. Like, they looked so badass last Friday, and then you look at him this Friday, and you're just kind of like, well, that's weird. So I don't know. I think it was the wrong decision. I didn't like it. It really kind of annoyed me. And like I said, I really like seeing him defend that belt on SmackDown and or Raw. I thought that was a really, really cool thing. I thought that was a cool little twist. Now, we're talking about SmackDown. I thought SmackDown was a pretty good show, even though I fell asleep for the final 10 minutes or so. My bad on that. I want to get your take, though, because the whole beginning of the show, the first, 10, 15 minutes with Roman Reigns, I thought was absolutely fantastic. They introduced Solo Sikoa. He has to acknowledge Roman Reigns. He acknowledges him. Everybody's getting ready to leave the ring. Sammy grabs a microphone, and he's like, I, too, want to say something. And everybody's like, what? Like, why are you... Roman Reigns just cuts into him and cuts deep. Like, why are you even talking? Nobody said you could talk. Why do you have that shirt on? Take that shirt off. And, like, Sammy's, like, confused, baffled. It really feels like this is the culmination. This is the moment that we're all waiting for, because we've all been waiting for this. We've been all waiting for Roman Reigns to turn on Sammy Zayn, or for Sammy Zayn to figure it all out, that he's just kind of being manipulated here. And they're going back and forth, and this is building, and it's getting uncomfortable. Like, it is an uncomfortable build, but it's great. And Sammy does such a great job of playing the scolded dog, basically with his tail between his legs and his big eyes looking up at you and his head kind of down and his back kind of hunched over. He does such a fantastic job of selling the scolded child, the scolded dog look. It is great. And Roman is continuing, like, take that shirt off. Who said you could wear that shirt? Take that shirt off. Next thing you know, Jey Uso jumps in and rips the shirt off him, because Uso starts basically barking at him. Like, take the shirt off! Take the shirt off! Rips it from his body. Only for Roman Reigns to be like, because I got you a new one. And it says honorary Us. I thought it was such a great moment. It had me, man. I want to know if it had you, because I thought this is the moment that we've kind of been waiting for. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. I thought this was absolutely fantastic. I thought Roman Reigns and Sami Zayn and Jey Uso all played their part to a T. This was next level stuff that we were getting. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And I was so excited when he got his t-shirt. I don't know why, but I was pumped.
Because it said honorary Us and it had SZ on there. I absolutely believed it. And I think the part that made it special was Sami Zayn maybe believed it to the degree that he was going to get his ass kicked. Like, he looked sad. He looked heartbroken. And that's part of the reason that Sami Zayn is just right there, is that he's in the moment. You can tell that he's portraying somebody that feels like he's about to be betrayed and he's about to be, excommunicated from the group that he wants to be in. And that's what's going to make it when it does eventually happen. And maybe they'll do it in a different way. Maybe, and you never know. I don't know how this could play out, but I think inevitably they're going to kick his ass. But I wonder how and when. But yeah, absolutely, they got me. I thought, oh, this is great. This is done. This is where it's at. And then the honorary Us shirt, his excitement was great. And then the crowd made it special too, because they went on the ride with everybody too. And it made for, even though it's a long talking segment, it made for a lot of fun to start SmackDown. I thought it was great. It's a great story within a story. What the hell is the Bloodline going to do? Because now you're telling stories within the dynamic of the Bloodline. How is Jey and Sammy going to coexist? Does Solo get jealous at any point? Because Solo right now is fond of is Sami Zayn. Do the Usos get in any kind of way, intrigued by what, or question Solo for what his loyalty is and things like that? You saw it play out a little bit in the main event. So it's great. It's great storytelling. It's great dynamics. It's great kind of keeping you on the edge of your seat kind of content. And that's what's made WWE kind of rise in the ratings, is content that makes you question things and surprises. So it was really great.
Yeah, I thought this was the highlight of WWE for me this week, was this opening segment. I thought this was absolutely fantastic. And they did a close up of Jay's face when Sammy got his shirt, and he looked so disgusted and he looked so upset. Like I said, everybody played their role to an absolute T. I thought this was absolutely fantastic, next level stuff. It was so good. It was absolutely great for me. Was there anything else on SmackDown that really caught your eye? I know we had a really great main event with the Usos taking on basically the Bash Brothers, what is it, Fight Club or whatever they are, Pete Dunne and the guy who broke Big E's neck. I can't remember his name off the top of my head here. Was there anything else that really caught your eye?
I thought SmackDown was a good show. I thought that, I think his name is Rich Holland.
That's it.
Yeah, the honorary Us segment, like we said, is talked about. So I think, Zayn is officially welcomed into it. The Usos win. I think they're making the Usos really special. See, the part that kind of caught my attention again is what are they doing with Lacey Evans? It makes no sense.
Yeah.
It's like you got a character that they've kind of redone a couple times. I'm excited that they announced an Intercontinental title rematch against Gunther Sheamus that we've talked about. The announcement that Drew McIntyre is going to challenge Killer Kross to a strap match at Extreme Rules. That's going to be awesome. Braun Strowman defeating Otis was great. To see Braun Strowman return back to the ring after talking to him in Detroit, it was crazy. And I don't know.
He looks so good. Like
he looks amazingly good.
He is in such good shape. It's unreal.
Exactly. Now, damn near pushing 40 years old, and he's in the greatest shape of his life. And I wonder if, his great comments that said, hey, I want to return, or I'm open to anything, or being grateful for the opportunity that he did have, and it's untapped potential. So to see that was great. Raquel Rodriguez defeated Dakota Kai. I thought it was okay. I graded it better than Raw. Obviously, I gave it a B+, but yeah, absolutely. The things I don't want to see, and it stinks because the mid-card in Raw is a little bit better than the mid-card on SmackDown. I'm trying, but I am not digging maximum male models in any capacity. Like, they've done less than nothing to make me believe that this is going to be anything more than a gimmick that potentially could get these guys to walk into the office and say, look, I'm out. I don't want to do this anymore. Maximum male is terrible.
It is terrible, but what if it was a build to get you back to LA Knight?
It could, fine if they do it. It was. To
me, it would suck because you're sacrificing 3 people to get one star out of it. But I get it. Out of everybody in that group, he's got the most potential.
Yeah, and then the entertaining part of the show was Hit Row, Street Profits, and Shinsuke Nakamura partying backstage. It's a creative way to use guys that you want to continue to elevate. So good 2 hours.
Random Drulak sightings too.
Exactly. So it was a good SmackDown. It led into what they're going to be trying to do now moving forward to Extreme Rules. So I'm very excited for it.
Yeah, I thought SmackDown was much better than Raw. I thought it was much more entertaining. I thought it was very, very good. I thought we got probably the most news, and if you look at our rundown, there's a ton to talk about coming out of AEW's Grand Slam. A lot of title changes, a lot of things going on, a lot of guys making a lot of different noise, and I think I kind of want to start with some of the noise. You've got guys like FTR who have been basically crushing the rating system in AEW and talking about how it just feels like it doesn't mean anything anymore. And there's been a little bit of scrutiny on their win-loss record, and there's been a little bit of more backlash on that win-loss record. Well, Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer Radio said that it still matters, but only kinda. The ratings and the win-losses just aren't as important. And FTR recently did an interview where they stated, look, we've been the number 1 tag team since April. They're starting to work this into storyline because they've been so outspoken about it. And they said that at this point we would be champions. And they called Tony Khan out saying, hey, give us a shot. Like, we've been number 1 forever. Why haven't we received a title shot for a tag team? So I kind of want to gauge your reaction, because this was a company that wanted to be more sports orientated. It made a really big deal about the ranking system. It said that rankings matter and says win-losses matter, because we all know in WWE win-losses don't matter. They said that it does. And they put a heavy emphasis on it for the first 2.5 years. And it feels like lately they just don't mean as much. And the way the rankings kind of worked, it did get them into a little bit of booking trouble when they were trying to book stories, when you would have a more interesting storyline with the guy who's ranked 3rd going up against a champion instead of the guy who's ranked number 1. I still feel like if you're going to push the rankings and you're going to tell us that they were important, they still should be important. You just have to figure out another way to work around your own obstacle that you created. Should the rankings be taken more serious, or should they just do away with them altogether?
See, that's tough, because I like to see that. I like to see how many wins Chris Jericho's had. I like it, but I'm okay with kind of how they're doing it. But it is weird to see that the Acclaim jumped ahead of FTR. You know what I mean? It's very weird to see that FTR has not had more opportunities, and so that's where it gets a little bit gimmicky, in that if you're going to have the rankings, how are they going to be implemented? Because you basically, in essence, devalued your ranking system. In essence, if you're over, you get an opportunity, and then they win the title. Like the Acclaim winning the title and Kenny will love this, is great for pops. It's great for cheap pops and things like that. But are they the best tag team in AEW? Fuck no. No, they're not. They're the most over. They're popular because the guy raps and says things he's not supposed to say. But they're not the best wrestlers. They're not the best performers. They're not the most technically crisp each and every week. Absolutely not. But when they won, did I smile a little bit? Yeah, it was cool. But I think that this is a situation in which now if FTR defeats Acclaimed, what does that mean? It means that, I would have rather had FTR defeat Swerve Strickland and, Keith Lee. I would have rather had FTR defeat the Young Bucks. So absolutely, it's just convoluted now where you've basically devalued your ranking system and you've made it a situation in which now we look at the rankings, but it doesn't automatically indicate you're going to get an opportunity. And I guess that's what Tony Khan does. He's a fan. He can do whatever he wants, but it's probably not, in my opinion, the best for business.
Yeah, I feel like we talk about how you need to have steps to become a champion, and it's kind of about going on that ride with guys that really helps get guys over. Like Stone Cold Steve Austin is still over to this day, and he's still one of the most beloved wrestlers of all time. And it was because you got to go on this journey with him. You got to go on the journey of him winning King of the Ring. You got to go on a journey with him going through matches where he was a heel and he became a face. You got to go on that journey with him, and the rankings kind of gave you a little bit of insight into kind of who's tracking where, because I don't think AEW does a good enough job with their mid-tier title. I don't think they do a good enough job with their TNT championship. I think they do really a poor job with that belt. It really feels like it kind of gets lost in the shuffle. So when you have the rankings, I think it helps point you in a direction of, hey, watch this guy, watch him track, see what happens. When's he in line for that shot? And you and I are smart enough, and I think a lot of people who listen to our show are smart enough to kind of realize, okay, well, who's the number one contender? Kind of where do they rank on the card? Do they have a legit shot at winning a championship? And you're kind of like, okay, no, now's not the time. So they'll probably face the champion and they'll lose, and they'll have to fight their way back up. And it's about doing that, going through all of that, and the feuds that you have along the way that really get you invested in a character and really get you behind them to one day where you have a tag team like the Acclaim. And the Acclaim kind of, it's so organic, and it came from out of nowhere. And that's what makes wrestling great. And the guys who are really, really great and who are really, really over, it happens organically. That's what happened with the Acclaim. The Acclaim got this groundswell, and it happened so organically. And yeah, they're not the best in the ring. I've got issues with the match where at Grand Slam where they won, where they defeated Swerve in Our Glory. I've got major issues with that match where things were put in that didn't need to be put in. There were moves that were done that didn't have to be done. And I do want to talk about all of those. But they're the prime example of going on a ride. They were put in a comic act, and they got that comic act over to where everybody was debating that they should have won the championship belts at All Out, that there should have been an audible called at All Out, and they should have won those belts. That's how over they are. Only for us to fast forward, and they win them at Grand Slam, which was their hometown. So it was a really nice tip of the cap for them. I thought it was great that the Acclaim won the tag team championships. I don't understand how they were in line, especially when you're looking at the rankings, and FTR has been number one forever and a day. Doesn't make any sense to me. I thought it was great. I did have, like I said, had some issues with the match. I kind of want to touch base with you on whether you like them winning or not, and I want to see if you had the same issues, because a couple of things that I didn't like, and it was a few things, and we're going to kind of talk about some of the issues with the refs at the very, very end of the segment. So stick around for that. But they go up to the top of the ring ropes, and Keith Lee's laid out in the middle of the ring, and Anthony Bowens hits his move, and then Matt Caster goes to hit his move, jumps down, and he feigns like he lands awkward on his knee. Later on, I had to stop the show. I had to rewind the show to make sure that he wasn't actually hurt, that it was all part of the bit. I was in our group chat. I was late messaging what was happening because you were like, and new, and I was like, ah, shit, I know they won now, but I was like a couple minutes behind because I was like, was he really hurt? I stopped everything to go back and rewatch that. That move, him feigning like he was hurt, I think zapped that crowd. That crowd was so hot. He ended up taking them down a couple of levels. I don't think that was needed. I don't know why you're a babyface or you're portraying a babyface and you've got Billy Gunn on the outside hitting a famouser to then help you get the win. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, you could have skipped the weird little leg thing, and you could have skipped Billy Gunn on the outside and just finished the match on the high point when Keith Lee was laid out in the middle of the ring. Instead, they ended up going on for another 5 to 6 minutes. Wasn't necessary, and it kind of killed some of that match. I love the Acclaim. The Acclaim, I think, are fantastic. I find them to be so interesting. I like the fact that they won. I didn't like the way that match was set up at the very, very end. I was into that match for probably the first 15 minutes. But the way that match ended, I was not very excited about. What were your thoughts on them winning and then kind of how that match played out?
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't clean. It wasn't crisp. It wasn't the elegant tag team match that you and I thought. But, you know, they gave the crowd something. They built up the doubt a little bit, and I think that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to take the crowd through a little bit of a high and then bring them down and creep in some doubt. And you saw that when they did win, the crowd did explode, they did pop, and they were excited. But yeah, I thought that the spot was not executed well enough because it was just something where the camera angle's bad. I think that they would have done better to have the side angle, not just because it looked like from the way it looked. From that angle, it looked like he jumped and just fell down, like it was a botch.
Yeah.
So that's why that doesn't look right. It looks like this big, huge monster of a man just flops to the ground, and it doesn't look right. It looks stupid. So that the camera angles didn't do well. So I think what could have been done was the production level. And, yeah, I mean, the interference of their manager doesn't bother me. That's what managers do. They get in the mix and they kind of make it a little bit even, and they just try to maybe give a little bit of an extra edge. But I get it. It devalues the value of the tag team when they need help from their decrepit old manager. But in the end, that's what they
Billy
want.
Gunn still looks great.
He still looks great. Still can get in the ring and handle business. It's crazy that he's still doing it. So it's great that he's part of it. It's just one of those things where you and I always tend to prefer wrestlers that are crisp and the best as opposed to those that are over. But this is like one of those situations in which the Bushwhackers win and not the Hart Foundation because they're over. That's just the way it is. They're over. Like when DX was hot and it was the Road Dogg Jesse James and the badass Billy Gunn. Were they the best wrestlers at the time? No, but they were over. So they got some title reigns. Whereas at times you felt like potentially, teams like, tag teams that are just better in the ring, like, Edge and Christian and things like that were more worthy as opposed to, others that are just more flashy and over with the crowd. But hey, that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to get a tag team over. And maybe this is one of those times where the belt will make the tag team as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of see what happens. I hope they go on a bit of a run. I would have loved to have seen FTR take on Swerve in Our Glory. I think that would have been fantastic matches. Those would have been absolutely great. But instead, the Acclaim are the winners. We'll see if they clean up some of the clunkiness, because I do feel like the very end of that match was also kind of clunky, where you had Keith Lee and you had Swerve Strickland exiting, and they seemed like they were a little confused. You had the Acclaim looking like there was something else that was supposed to take place, but then they just kind of like, well, we'll just enjoy the moment. The end was a little bit clunky for me as well. Something I don't necessarily get, but I can see why you would do it, was Chris Jericho beating Claudio Castagnoli to become ROH champion. I want to get your thoughts on this, and then I want to try to explain why I think this was done, and you tell me if I'm crazy. What did you think of Jericho beating Claudio? I
understand. I think I'm going to be curious to see what you say, so I'm going to reserve my thought on it because I think it's going to align. But I looked at it from the perspective of Claudio, not from the perspective of Jericho. Like, the guy doesn't need any more titles. The guy is there. He's over the crowd. He's got the crowd in the palm of his hand. He can do whatever he wants. He can wrestle any kind of match he wants to wrestle, whether it be crisp technical to brutal to fast-paced, in-your-face high spots. He can do whatever he wants. But I looked at it like it was such a great honor for Claudio to earn this title that to get less than a 2-month reign out of it is really kind of disgusting. And I look at it and I say, what does this guy got to do more? He's put in his time. He's done all the work. He's traveled up and down the roads. He's in one of the great groups in the Combat Club, and it does not make it so that he can avoid a business decision. Come on. I think that, the behind the scenes issues that you're going to talk about and the reasoning is not, in my mind, worth devaluing the guy that you could have elevated. Imagine a year run with Claudio having great matches with Jericho, with the likes of, young up-and-comers, established stars that he keeps winning. Eddie Kingston wants a shot. You just kind of devalued the ROH title a little bit, not by who got it, but by the fact that the champion couldn't defend it for more than a couple months, a couple challengers. I think it would have been best served to keep the belt on Claudio because the man has earned it. I mean, what more does the guy got to do? He's been through the wars. He comes over, and that's how you do him? Like, dude, you just give him a charity run for 60 days, and then you move on for other reasons? I felt disappointed, and it was shitty because when it was announced, you kind of had the feeling it was going to go that way.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It was strictly a business decision. Remember, Tony Khan's trying to get television for Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
What way to do it, and what way helps you more than putting your championship belt on arguably your biggest star in your company, the guy who has name recognition, the guy who has been there, done that, has won damn near every championship in the world and is able to carry himself in such a way where he can shake hands, kiss babies with businessmen, and then go take care of business in the ring. This is another thing that I think makes Chris Jericho so valuable to Tony Khan is you go back to the All Out media scrum. You go back to All Out when things had just imploded. Chris Jericho was one of the guys who walked into the media scrum, knew everything that took place, conducted business like a professional, mentioned to Tony Khan like, hey, all this just happened. Tony Khan had no idea what was going on in the back. Had no clue because he was not there. He didn't have his phone on him. He was in the media scrum. It was what it was. Chris Jericho walks in, whispers in his ear like, hey, you got Punk and you got the Elite beating the shit out of each other in the back. This is what's going on. Don't worry about it. It's already been taken care of. Let's just continue on and we'll address it when we're done. Chris Jericho has basically been a guiding hand for Tony Khan and has been a guy that Tony Khan can kind of lean on. You've got a brand new business entity that, let's be honest, Tony Khan's not doing a whole ton with Ring of Honor. He really isn't. He's got some of the guys who were staples in Ring of Honor coming in and doing some work on AEW, but he hasn't really done anything with it. He's put on a couple of shows that have been really, really good, but realistically, he doesn't have any financial income coming in for it. Everything is off the coattails of AEW. So how do you do that? You put your belt, your biggest belt, on one of the biggest superstars in all of wrestling, and then you present him to TBS, TNT, Warner Discovery, whomever you got to present him to and be like, look, we got this guy. This guy is the biggest in the business, and if people want to see him, they now have to tune in on Wednesday nights after 10 o'clock to watch our Ring of Honor show. And it is strictly a business decision. And I get what you're saying because to me, I thought Claudio did a pretty good job. I thought that his run was a little bit weak, and it was just kind of how they set him up. It wasn't him in the ring. I thought in the ring he's been absolutely fantastic. But I understand why you would do it. I just don't necessarily like it. And I think me and you are on the same wavelength there.
Yeah, and I think you could have also make the argument that Claudio could build a company too. You don't think Claudio with, great storytelling with Chris Jericho? Here's what you do. You play it up. You have Claudio maybe have some interference. You maybe have Daniel Garcia in the mix where it's not just like continue to build the storyline and weave two of them together. Daniel Garcia walks down to the ring just for a minute and you don't know if he's going to help Jericho or not, just for the right moment where Claudio then gives him a big uppercut and he wins. Now you can carry that, hey, I was going to beat you. Chris Jericho can feign the heel shit and say, hey, I was going to beat you. I could still take you. And then you build it as, hey, this is something that we're going to start to be the first feud that we can carry to TV. You could have just did it where you say we have a couple of feuds that are ready to be told. once we get this in the mix, where you start to kind of have an open story that hasn't been resolved yet, that we're going to start to resolve when we get a television deal. So you could have just kept it going, but I get it, and I think that argument with Chris Jericho, look, you can still argue that Chris Jericho is going to show up on television. You say, hey, we have this product, we have these characters. Here's who's going to show up for the first. You show them two weeks of scripts. Here's our first 2 shows laid out. The first show is going to be opened with a promo from Chris Jericho cussing out Daniel Garcia and ripping the champion. Claudio comes out and laughs his head off and says, look, I'm here now and you're part of the past and I'm going to be the future of this company. And then you have other type stuff too with the segment 2 is the television champ Samoa Joe saying, hey, I'm ready to take on all comers. Then you have someone surprised, maybe from AEW, show up. I mean, you have talent. You don't have to show, hey, I got Chris Jericho as the champion. You say, I have these 6 guys that are going to lay out this first show, and it's going to get at least 500,000 viewers. You have to sell it that way, as opposed to what they did, which I thought really brought down Claudio. Which, like, now, okay, Claudio's in what? What's he going to do? So does he then transition now to be television champ? What is he? TNT champ? What is he going to do? You took away a clear direction that could have been fun for him, and it's just disappointing.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100% because it really feels like what do you do with Claudio now? Like, how do you build Claudio after this? Like, where does he go? Like, yeah, he's part of one of the more interesting groups, but what direction does he have? Like, where? Like, the way he was beaten, I don't really know if there's a way for you to build off of what happened. Like, yeah, Jericho did kind of cheat, low blow, and then Judas effect, 1, 2, 3, but I don't know what you do here. I get it, but I don't like it. I don't think it was great. I do want to transition into what we got for our main event.
Yes.
Because we still have more to unpack with this show. This show was, what they gave us on Dynamite was absolutely crazy. There was so much stuff. Jon Moxley ends up winning the AEW championship in what I thought was a fantastic match. I thought it was absolutely great. Ends up beating Bryan Danielson. Was he the right choice? Because I think you could make the argument that Bryan Danielson probably should have won that, and you could have did more interesting business with those guys being one apiece and being the leaders of their group.
It's very difficult because it's 1-1A. Those two are the top of their game. Moxley, look, I just think that now he's kind of the full package attitude of the company, where he's got the package. He can wrestle any kind of style. He's young and he's hungry, and I think he's the right guy. But at the same time, Bryan Danielson and his work has also been stellar and has been able to establish himself on par with the likes of Moxley. So it's not a problem. It just, like I said, now just let Moxley hold the title for a little bit. Let's establish some real stars in the meantime, in the next maybe 6 months. And then the next one that you decide has to kind of be someone really, really at the top of their game. Danielson's there close, but he's not the top. It's Jon Moxley. He's the top of their game. And I think the business with MJF is going to be spectacular. And the problem is now the feud's going to be next. And I'm not so certain yet, and we'll debate that in coming episodes. Is MJF the next title holder? He should be, but it stinks because I think that Moxley has more to give. So I'm very fascinated to see how it plays out.
See, I think if you do that, because I think Jon Moxley was kind of done dirty here. Jon Moxley has almost felt like he's that girlfriend that you have that you really kind of like, but you just don't see a future with. You just kind of keep going back to her because you don't want to be alone. It's wintertime, so you go back to her. And then summer and spring roll around and you're like, okay, I'm out. And then wintertime rolls back around and you go back to her. That's what Jon Moxley feels like at this time. This is his 3rd time holding this championship in a month and a half? Like, think about that. That's just stupid. Like, that's just dumb. He is your standby, which is great because he's so valuable. Honestly, him and Chris Jericho are so damn valuable to this company, it's absolutely unreal. But all that being said, you keep using him like he's your ex-girlfriend that you just keep running back and forth to. It devalues his character, devalues what he's. You should never have taken that championship off him. He was the intermediate champion or whatever. Yeah, interim. Thank you. He was interim champion, and then he ends up combining the belts He's now your champion, and then you take it off of him. Then you have a guy who throws a hissy fit and acts like a crybaby, and then you got to hold a tournament for it. This is the guy. He's the guy. Put the belt on him. Let him be the guy. Let him do it, okay? There was no need for any of this. So now we're here, and now you've got MJF on the horizon, and we all know MJF's going to get the belt. You can't give MJF the belt in any time period that is shorter than 8 months. Jon Moxley has to be your champion for at least the next 8 to 9 months. I would probably push it to 11 months and 29 days if I could. There's no reason to take this belt off him. Give this man a long title run. Let him be the guy. He is the guy. Right choice. I think the way it was done was absolutely stupid. I think you could have did a bit of a more interesting story long term, like down the line. But now if Bryan Danielson won it and they were both 1-1 in their group and they had to battle for bragging rights for control of Blackpool Combat Club. But that's a different story. Jon Moxley's the guy. Leave the damn championship on him. Don't pull it.
I think one way to kind of get Claudio and Daniel back into the mix is turn the Combat Club heel, where MJF is about to win and Claudio comes in and interferes. Like Claudio can be the muscle. And, in some way a favor is returned and, MJF can get kind of that, you remember when, the Danielson was in WWE and he lost in 20 seconds. The next night he was the most over he was in the history of the company. So you do the same thing to MJF where he's about to win clear cut and then Claudio comes in and destroys him. I think you turn the Combat Club heel and you kind of then continue that feud maybe longer than it needs to be so that when MJF finally does win it, he can take over as the placeholder. But there's a lot of things you can do with it. I agree with you in that this championship stretch from the time that Adam Hangman Page had it at its most prestigious, and now like when you look at iPhone battery life, the AEW World Championship was 100% on point. It was valuable at the highest peak with Adam Hangman Page. Now with what they've done with Moxley and CM Punk and Moxley in the tournament has brought now the value of the AEW title down to like 85%, and you got to build it back up.
Yep. No, I agree with you 100%. 100% I agree with you. I want to know how hard you popped when Saraya showed up, a.k.a. Paige. Paige made her debut. This was a surprise. Normally you and I, we know the spoilers. We know the stuff before the stuff even happens. I didn't know this was happening. I was absolutely shocked. I was mind blown. I'll be honest with you. I was in my kitchen. I was taking my nighttime vitamins and I was making my nighttime. I drink this little like greens before I go to bed at night. I was making my greens and getting all my stuff ready for the next morning. And I was just kind of wrapping up my evening. And then she showed up on my screen and I lost it. I started jumping up and down like a little kid. I was screaming, "Let's go." I was excited to see Saraya, a.k.a. formerly Paige. She's all elite. I'm pumped up for this. I think she can help this women's division. I think she is absolutely fantastic. The thing is, she's got to be able to wrestle. I can't have Paige just being a mouthpiece. I need Paige to wrestle. There are too many mouthpieces in this company. We need more good female wrestling. What was your reaction to Paige, a.k.a. Saraya, a.k.a. Paige, being all elite, and can she help save the women's division?
Yeah, just don't give her a title for maybe another year, because too soon to get that visual out of my head. So it'll be something where you look at what her role is going to be, and now it's intriguing. I was definitely shocked. It was great the way in which she came down. She did the My House thing. All the women sold it great. It was a great visual with Dr. Britt, DMD, just sitting in the ring with blood and just looking like she was absolutely terrified. So I was absolutely into it. I loved every second of it. Now you have a figurehead that can kind of be now kind of like your Jon Moxley of the company on the women's side, where she's a staple. She's got to do her thing. I don't think she absolutely has to wrestle. I think that she can just potentially do some things that'll be impactful. But the schedule at AEW will make it so that if she does, she can be okay. So I hope it all works out for her, because she's only 30 years old. She can do another great things. So it'll be great. Let's just hope that.
You know what's crazy?
Yeah.
She's younger than Britt Baker.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't realize that.
Exactly. So
that's
you have
crazy.
Yeah.
That's how long she's been in the game.
Yeah, and so she's a forefront of the women's revolution in WWE. Now she can do a lot of great things behind the scenes as well, and she'll have an opportunity to get herself over now. It's an opportunity. Let's see what she does with it.
Yeah, absolutely. A major opportunity. I think it's a major coup for AEW. The women's division is severely lacking. It is basically Britt Baker and it is Britt Baker. Like that I feel like is the only one who is incredibly interesting in that women's division. I think you bring in Saraya, makes it that much more interesting all of a sudden, but she has to be able to wrestle. I do want to talk about some downsides that I see with AEW, just real quick. I want to know if you feel like Rampage suffers from too much. We got a 2-hour Rampage on Friday night. It was stuffed. Absolutely stuffed. There were hard cuts and hard edits. Obviously, Rampage taped ahead of time. This is why I knew what was happening because I had the spoilers. But Rampage taped ahead of time, and you could see some of the hard cuts. There were times where guys were in the ring, and then they would cut to the match beginning, and it was like, wait, what? Like, it was almost jarring. And then when we're going from hour 1 to hour 2, there was supposed to be a commercial. They set it up for a commercial. There was no commercial. They just butted the videos up next to each other, and they're like, here you go. So it's a couple of things. It's bad video editing on the part of AEW, and 2, it is just way too much stuff. They try to cram 10 pounds of shit into a 5-pound bag. You don't have enough time to let things breathe. We had like a 30-man battle royal, and that was done in approximately 5.5 minutes. Like, what? Like, what are we doing? Like, I should have closed your show. Like, there was no, like, what are you doing? There is entirely too much stuff on both Dynamite and Rampage. Specifically Rampage, they try to give you too much and make it way too fast. You sometimes have to let things breathe so they resonate with the audience, because the moment something happens, we're now moving on to something else, and it's like, wait, hold on, I didn't have time to digest what just happened and the magnitude of it. Do you feel like they try to cram too much stuff in AEW programming?
Absolutely. My note was, did Kenny edit this shit? What the hell's going on? You know, I'm like, Jesus, I need a little cleaner here. What the heck is going on with this? So I look at everything and I said, my note just said with Rampage, they should have just spread it out over 3 weeks. Let it play out. You just call it Grand Slam all through late September into early October, or you just do it over a weekend, a Grand Slam weekend. You know, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 1 hour each. You get more Rampage. More Rampage is fine. I don't need 2 hours of Rampage. It just, by that point, when you saw the way they did it, and I think you and I got a deeper understanding of it because we were at the Little Caesar show. By the time you're doing it, that show must have been going on for so long in New York that the crowd was dying because you're trying to tape so much stuff that you got to fit it in with television commercials. They had too much stuff, and they tried to cram it, and they didn't do it right. It's kind of like one of those things where we all recall trying to cram for a test, and you're like, shit, I was supposed to study the ins and outs of this situation, but I skip over a chapter, and you're like, oh shit, and then you realize when the test comes, you should have paid attention to the whole damn thing, and you should have studied evenly. And the way that show was edited was poorly done, and that's what was my takeaway, was like, what the hell is this? They tried to cram a 4-hour show into a 2-hour show, and that's how it showed.
Yep, exactly. And then to kind of build off of just how everything's just so crammed and so jammed in there. The referees and the usage of the referees. Ugh. We both agree referees play an amazing role in wrestling. They are part of the story. They are part of what gets told, and they help convey that to the audience. They have their role. I feel like AEW's referees are really bad at their jobs, though. They are visually looking at interference, and they don't necessarily turn away, or they're holding a ladder for a guy to go up and do a high spot, or they're just too involved in the action when they shouldn't be involved in the action, and it kind of pulls me out of the match. It takes me away from the match. And I think what you have is on Rampage, you've got Eddie Kingston beating up Sammy Guevara. Sammy Guevara got his comeuppance finally, and he won't release a move, and he's just going to town on him and fighting him. They finally call everybody out from the back, and then they reverse a decision. This feels like it's the first time this has ever been done, and it just doesn't make sense to me, and I feel like it is just poor. I feel like the referees tend to muddy the waters in the matches. I feel like when you watch WWE, the referees have their role, and they're part of the story, but they're kind of like, if you had like a mixed drink, right? They're either the orange brine or they're the cherry in the drink. They're not the ice cubes. They're not the mixer. They're not the booze. They're just kind of an accoutrement. In AEW, I feel like the referees try to be the ice cubes, try to be the mixer, try to be a little bit of the booze, and instead it just kind of mucks things up. Do the AEW referees detract from the matches and sometimes ruin the matches for you?
Absolutely. They can be better. That was my note when we were looking at this was it's not optimal. AEW is elite. You have to have elite officiating, and it's not that. So you got to move towards it. Especially now, you have women in there. You have these officials. You want to tighten everything up. That's what it is. That AEW is in the big time now. You have big time gates. You have $1 million gates. You can't have things lacking because it takes away from your product. So that's what I'm hoping for, is that they recognize that not everything in this ship is running smoothly. They have to tidy it up.
Yeah, it just tighten the screws. Get better. Be better. What was your show of the week this week?
My show of the week, now it's tough because it was real close between SmackDown and Grand Slam, but I thoroughly enjoyed what Grand Slam was able to accomplish on Wednesday. So I think AEW gets the credit for what they were able to do in regards to having great matchups, title matchups. Everything was important. The women even, I know that they don't take up and they sometimes don't get the credit that they deserve. But I thought Athena held her own. I was intrigued by what she was doing with Toni Storm and the ladies that were all in there. The debut of Saraya, I think, puts it over the top. Without Saraya, it's SmackDown. With Saraya, the show of the week is AEW's Dynamite.
Yeah, I think Dynamite gets the nod. It was between Dynamite and SmackDown for me as well. I just thought what we got with Dynamite was 2 hours of gripping action, and it was absolutely fantastic. I loved it. I thought it was wonderful. You ready for some news and notes?
Hit me at this week's professional wrestling news and notes. What made your list?
All right, this AEW star confirms he asked for his release. So, again, no big surprise here. Malachi Black addressed recent reports about his future in a new statement, confirming that he did ask for his AEW release. In the statement shared to Instagram, Black noted that the decision to ask to be let go from his AEW contract was one he had thought about for 6 months. In a lengthy Instagram post, Black wrote about his setbacks with injury, the suicide of a close friend, losing a family member, the toll it's taken on him and his wife Zelina Vega, that they've had to endure, and what seemed to be very important, the displeasure that his private conversations with AEW regarding his mental health were released. Black has asked for time to kind of recalibrate and refocus before he can continue to wrestle. Now, recent reports say backstage morale is up at AEW. However, that does not mean that people aren't asking to go elsewhere, like Malachi Black. According to Dave Meltzer in the latest Wrestling Observer newsletter, Black was one of the people WWE reportedly reached out to despite being under contract to AEW. Now, Malachi Black has a 5-year contract, so that is some heavy water that they're treading there. Not only that, but Black was one of many AEW stars who requested their release after Triple H took over the creative team. Meltzer wrote, "What we do know is that Black was one of the people WWE reached out to, even though he had signed a 5-year deal with AEW. When Paul Levesque took over from Vince McMahon, WWE contacted a number of former WWE talents that were working there and that either had left on their own or that Vince had fired. Black was not the only person to ask for his release at the time. It was not revealed who else requested the release, but don't be surprised if Cody Rhodes isn't the only former AEW talent working in WWE. So stick tuned for that. Now, Doc, I'm very, very sorry, but she is off the market and you don't have a chance. This past weekend, Mandy Rose got engaged, the NXT Women's Champ, and got engaged to former NFL safety Tino Sabatelli. They were engaged over the weekend and took to Instagram to post pics of the proposal and the ring. It's a very, very nice ring. Also, I know you're a huge fan of Mandy Rose's Instagram and her Twitter. So if you haven't checked either one of those out, check those out. They're pretty good. How much is the new MJF contract worth? Well, per Dave Meltzer in the latest edition of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, this new deal that MJF is now earning more than $1 million per year. For comparison, previous reports revealed that AEW originals likely started with the promotion on a salary between 40 to 70 grand before receiving a pay raise. It was believed that after that initial pay raise, MJF was earning hundreds of thousands of dollars, but that was significantly less than the number of stars who joined AEW after MJF, including CM Punk. CM Punk signed for a monster deal, like multiple six figures, and that was part of why MJF was so pissed off, because he drew more numbers, he helped build this company, and then you're going to sign a dude like Punk and give him basically a fortune. So he is making a ton of money. Now, the thing is, when he got this is more of a pay raise. I know they title it a new contract. There's no extension to his contract. He doesn't, his contract's going to end in 2024. The end date stays the same. He's just now making much more money. Now, it sounds like a tag team is out for a long period of time due to injury, as well as a few other bumps and bruised wrestlers. According to Dave Meltzer in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, the Viking Raiders are shelved for an indefinite period of time due to Eric suffering a foot injury. Aaliyah is also out of action, and it appears that Shotzi will be put in her place as Raquel Rodriguez's tag partner, but that may not be the case, as they may have just wanted to turn back Shotzi. It looks as though Aaliyah is going to be out for a little bit of time. The injury wasn't considered serious at the time that they released this information. She was listed for a return next week. We'll see kind of what happens there. Her injury was mentioned in the passing on television without really saying what it was, so we'll kind of have to wait and see. It seems as though Shotzi has now been paired with Raquel Rodriguez. And that's going to do it for this week's wrestling news and notes, my brother.
Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Anywhere you listen and download your favorite podcast, make sure you type in Detroit Sports Podcast, and our content will find you as we cover the world of professional wrestling each and every week. AEW, WWE, NXT, New Japan, anything that is popular, even in the indie scene. Thanks, everybody. The Doc and Jock Wrestling Podcast is coming to a close. Podcasting time is over. Make sure you find us next week on the latest edition of the Doc and Jock Wrestling Podcast.